have fun. It's really cool. We like it when people can watch in their pajamas. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to another event here at the Poison Pen. I am very lucky. My name is Patrick, one of two, here at the store to interview one of my favorite writers, and I think probably one of yours, New York Times bestselling writer Chuck Wendig, here for Staircase in the Woods.
Thanks for coming out, everybody.
So the funny thing is that whenever an author comes to the store about their book, we can never really discuss their newest book too far in depth. So we want to give you a taste, but we don't want to spoil it. So, and this is an incredible book, one that I couldn't put down. I sat down and read it in about 2.5 sittings. Damn. I mean, it was amazing. I was completely hooked, Chuck.
Thank you.
And you're a great writer. Everything that you've written, I think, is amazing.
This is the best kind of interview, by the way. So
I just need a fanboy just for a second. So, Staircase in the Woods is really a cool book because it is a really interesting take on kind of the horror genre, a little bit of our creepypasta sort of meme, so to speak. You know, where you see those weird photos of staircases just somewhere in the woods. Can you tell us where that came from, where that idea?
Yeah, I have long been sort of interested in Fortean type of, information, the stuff that is now creepypasta that was sort of urban legend, but also had that Charles Fort vibe of like there is like a secret science to all of this. And, I love local folklore and just creepy stuff. And so a long time ago, like generally speaking, I don't write my ideas down if I don't have to. I like to submit them to what I call Idea Thunderdome, which is like I ignore them purposefully, willfully ignore my ideas. But if they keep showing back up in my brain, then like they have one Idea Thunderdome and they deserve a place. So if they do that, I write them down in a notes app. And I have one file that's a notes specific file for stories. And I've had it for a long time, for years. And the first item in that notes app is the literal tagline of this book. The 5 kids go into the woods, find a staircase in the woods. One of them goes up, disappears, and that's that. It doesn't actually have the future part because eventually I would pitch this as a middle grade, but I can talk about that later. So I was, again, thinking about writing this book, and I was going to try to write it as a middle grade. And I went up to Gibson's bookstore, another great bookstore, up in New Hampshire, and I was talking about this to the audience, like, oh, I kind of want to write this Staircase in the Woods book, so I think that's what's next. And someone was like, there's one near here. And I was like, where? And they're like, well, it's that way. And they were lying to me because it wasn't that way. I'm like, I can't go to that. I have to drive in the opposite direction the next day and go to New York State. So I was like, damn. But I did Google it later, and it was not where they said it was. It was on the other side. And so I was able to pass by it on the way to my next book stop on the book tour. So there's this place there called Madame Sherry's Castle, and it is a stone staircase in the woods that curves. Madame Sherry was like a costume designer in New York City and wanted to make basically like an indulgent party castle in the woods with all of her money. But the money dried up, and so as she was in the middle of building this castle, she just abandoned it entirely. Just like, oh, well, bye, and went back to New York City, leaving it to crumble, but the staircase remains, and so you can go and see it. And then I think a dude walked up it at one point and part broke off of it, so there's actually now, it's super dangerous in a way that goes beyond the supernatural. Just don't walk up one. So like that kind of thing, and at the start of the pandemic, when everyone was trapped in their houses and we could not go on vacation, I was able to rent a local VRBO and Airbnb near us that I could come home that night and feed our dogs, but it like could feel like a vacation. And that was another one, like just in their yard. Not only did they have a giant giraffe, fake giraffe in the woods, but they also had like a set of staircases in the woods that went like up like this and then like that. It was probably connected to some sort of tree house or some sort of structure, but just the way everything had grown up over it was just this spooky, sinister thing. So over time, I was like, I need to make that note in my notes app work somehow, and the story hit me. And then I pitched it as middle grade, and my middle grade editor was like, "This is dark," and I was like, "Yeah, good point," because it was just kids at that point. Like I did not have the fast forward And so I was like, maybe that could be my next adult horror. And then my agent and I talked through it and figured out the angle, and now it's a real book.
It's such a cool book too. I mean, it's all about four friends who are trying to find somebody they lost.
They're in some ways they're not trying to find someone they lost. In essentially the log line is one of these friends. They had 5 friends, and one of them, when they're teenagers, discovers this staircase in the woods, and he's drunk and for various emotional reasons decides to show off and goes up the staircase, disappears at the top of it, and then the staircase goes with him. And so these 4 friends are left behind. And of course, the question is like, does everyone think they murdered him? Like, what are they? He's not going to come home, but they are from this camping trip in the woods. And it fractures them. It destroys them both individually, and their friendship is sort of over. They had this bond before that they called the Covenant, and it shatters that. And then we fast forward to the future where one of these 4 is really invested in finding another staircase, and the others don't know it.
And then what happens from there, we can't tell you.
No, I won't. That's state secret.
But what I really love about your writing is the fact that you always delve deep into the psychology of your characters. And in the staircase in the woods, you really delve deep into the 4 friends, especially, and Maddie as well. What is it about delving into the psychology before you really get into the action? Because that's usually what you do. You build up, get us to know and care for the characters, and then you lead us into the real high action.
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, you don't have to do anything, but you want to care about the characters. The characters is really why you're in a story at the end of the day. I mean, you can kind of do, obviously, very plot-based stories and stuff that's more based on world building, but at the end of the day, at least for me, I show up because I care about the characters, and they're the stakes. They're responsible for the stakes on the table. They are the stakes on the table. They're everything that matters about the story. And we kind of want to be like Yoda on Luke's back, riding them through this experience. So it's important to figure out who they are, especially with a book like this, which relies really big time on who they are, who they were as friends, who they have become as friends. It's a very regret-driven book. They're driven by their regrets, by the shared trauma of losing a friend, and how they've sort of failed that friend, and they broke the covenant on their own. And so, doing that level of excavation gives you a sense of who they are, a shape of who they are, and then arguably, hopefully, you care about them. Even though I didn't try to write like likable characters in this case, I wasn't trying to make like 4 plucky heroes going to the woods. These are like really kind of messed up people. But I want you to still care about them. I find that likable characters, especially in genres like horror, not always necessary as long as they're livable. I don't think they have to be likable. I think they have to be livable, which is to say you want to live with them for a while. You want to follow them and be with them and see what they experience and go on that journey with them and see where it takes them, because then it's taking you there alongside of them. So many of our great characters in film and TV and books are not necessarily likable. So I was trying to sort of thread that needle of making them still be someone you really want to be with. And then by the end, maybe you come around to understanding them and liking them to some degree.
Living with 4 Prince Joffreys would be a little hard, wouldn't it?
That wouldn't be great. Yeah.
That would be a painful experience right there. But the fact of the matter is that these characters, they're broken, but at the same time, like you said, they're livable, they're likable. We understand why they're broken. And I think that's part of the fun, the mystery behind how relationships become complicated from teenagehood to adulthood.
Yeah, right. I mean, and friendships as adults is hard. Like you're just like, you'll be like talk to a friend, and be like, hey, you want to go get something? When was the last time we got a drink? And it's like 6 months. And you're like, what? How is that possible? And you're like, well, you're adults and things happen. And then you forgot and time passed, and then you're like, right, I have people in my life I need to talk to, but kids and job and everything else, time sort of slips away. And then if you have friends from your youth as an adult, there's the sort of complications of all of the slings and arrows that have happened in your individual lives, but together and between each other. If anyone here has had a friend break up, boy, that's hard. And this book is definitely a little bit about friend breakups too. Like those are some emotionally traumatic experiences that I don't think we talk about a lot. It's usually like breakups are assumed to be a romantic thing, but when you have a friend for a really long time and suddenly you're not friends anymore for whatever reason, sometimes a very dramatic reason, sometimes just because you did the dreaded growing apart, that's hard. And the regrets that you get from that, and the sort of like I still dream about friends that I had in high school. Not even that they're like we had a traumatic break, but people I just don't see anymore. You're like, I dream about them. And so I kind of wanted to harness some of that for this book and have that feeling in here, because it's not something I feel like I see all that often.
But in most of your books, you enjoy bringing us into the characters. I was talking to you in the back about your book, Atlanta Burns, which is one of my all-time favorites. And she is a very broken character. She's a sleuth. It's a noir mystery, really, more than anything. And she's a kick-ass character, but you really put her through her paces, and you put all of your characters through kind of this emotional, what would I say, war, almost a war,
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to know? Is there a question, or is it just like a you monster?
Yeah. No.
You hurt them.
You hurt them. How dare you?
Yeah.
No, but is that part of your writing process, is really digging down deep into their psyche and getting into what kind of makes people?
Yeah. Yeah. And the torment, I mean, I probably am a monster. Because, that's like, it's what you do. You're like, I'm going to make believe a bunch of people and then put them through hell. Like, it doesn't seem like it's probably not healthy being a writer. But it is what it is. So people want to read that, and I want to write that, and that works out. But I think, the shape of story demands that level of like ups and downs and the sort of the nadir of human experience, and carrying them through a journey that requires them to overcome things and fight things and maybe sometimes not overcome things. And that's what life looks like. I mean, that whole Buddhist all life is suffering thing is true to some degree, and I think fiction brings that to bear for the readers and for the writer.
I just don't think I've ever seen a Pollyanna character in your book. They all have a little bit of baggage to them, even the ones that are a little bit more happy-go-lucky.
Yeah, baggage is fun. Again, it's mean. Like, you're like, now you've got some shit to deal with, buddy.
Well, and it helps build conflict as well.
It does. When it's story. That stuff is story. And, like, I think nobody gets through this life without baggage. And it would be weird to write characters who didn't have that. I feel like, especially in horror, which I feel like should be as honest a genre as you can get. Sometimes in fantasy, certainly you'll see characters like, I'm the good-looking hero who's a stand-in for the ego of the author, whatever that is. Yeah. But, I think in horror, you can't duck that. If you do, it doesn't feel right. I mean, you don't always have to be like, I'm going to punish you into eternal hell, but they got to be put through their paces.
Why do you think horror's having a moment?
No idea. I definitely don't just look outside and be like, ooh, oh no.
I know, but usually the readers want to escape, right?
But that's the thing. I think, okay, so when I was a kid, right, I did not like horror. I was afraid of horror in the literal sense. Like, to me, and it's why I wrote my middle grade monster movie. My sister, 11 years older than me, she went to go see a film people may have seen called The Exorcist. And so she regaled me with tales of what happens when you go see The Exorcist. Oh, people were throwing up. People had heart attacks. They died because it was so scary. So in my mind, I was like, well, that's horror. It doesn't matter what's in the story. It is itself a demonic entity, and thus I will never, ever see it. So I was like, I don't really do horror. I like science fiction. So we would go to like the movie store, the video store, because that's, of course, I'm old and that's what you had to do. And I would see like the rack of all of the melting faces and the knife fingers and rawhead Rex. And I was like, oh, nope, no, I'm going to do the long way around. And I'd land in science fiction. And it'd be like, I really like Star Wars, and I loved all like the Cantina aliens and everything. So there's this movie called Alien. So I'm going to rent that. That's going to work well. And I took, and no one stops you. No one back then cared. They're like, "Do you want cigarettes? Whatever you want, kid." So my mom didn't know what it was, and the guy behind the video counter was not interested in caring. So I got that movie, And I took it home, and I was like, ah! And then it was all like, okay. I was just like, I felt good. I felt sort of like that. I'm like, that was pretty awesome. It did not destroy me. It didn't kill me. I didn't throw up, heart attack, and die. So at that point, I was kind of into horror. And my sister put a book in my hands called Swan Song. And Swan Song, like The Stand was not my first horror rodeo. It was Robert McCammon's Swan Song. And I was, again, like a kid who had to go to the video store to rent things. I was also a kid who went to bed and be like, don't worry, you might be annihilated by nuclear fire in the night. Sleep well. That was just like Russia might attack us with nukes. So what are you going to do about that? So it was terrifying. Like, life at that age felt weirdly terrifying. And that is the entire book of Swan Song. Is it starts with nuclear annihilation. And then it's a crazy wasteland of weird magic and a devil figure pursuing a magical girl across this landscape. And I read it, and I felt better afterward. I was weirdly comforted by it. I felt like, well, no matter what happens, it's probably not going to be this bad. But also, like, these people made it through, even though they're fictional people, like in a contextual way. They got through it, and they survived it, and maybe that has given me a sort of emotional narrative fortitude to also get through it. And I think that's maybe why horror works, like, especially right now, because we're needing to see people getting through stuff, or even if they don't make it through the thing, we still feel like, well, that was probably a lot worse than what's happening. So it is a weird sort of escapism, even when it's, not.
Exactly. Yeah, and I've kind of been thinking the same thing because I've been reading an awful lot of horror lately, and oddly enough, a lot of it happening in the woods. So
Yeah.
So your book, and I just interviewed Allison Gunn with her new book Notorious, both of which take place in the woods. And the woods are a fairly scary place when, especially now that we don't have we're not really in touch with nature or anything like that. So is there a particular attraction to you in the woods? I mean, Pennsylvania is quite a wooded country.
It's pretty wooded. Yeah, I just go out there and just stare. Just go out there in the woods and just stand there for hours. No, where I grew up, we had, I don't know, 16, 20 acres, something like that, of just wooded land. And I did spend a lot of time out there because, like, it's one of the things I think to sort of lens this book a little bit. You could argue that half of the book kind of has that kids on bikes genre. But I think the one thing I don't see a lot of people talking about the kids on bikes genre is why that was a particular sort of like Gen X and maybe like late millennial, not late, like older millennial sort of thing, was like we wanted to leave our houses because we didn't like home. Like, home was not a great place, not because necessarily of abuse, certainly sometimes because of that, but I just don't think our parents were good at being like the what we view as parents. I compare it to, like, when I was a kid, it was okay to have a dog chained up in your yard as a watchdog. And now we look at that as being like, well, that's abuse of an animal. Correctly. We see that and we're like, we now want our dog in our house. And we call our dogs our children and put them in outfits. So things have changed significantly. And we don't chain children up in the yard either anymore. So that's, I think, a big nice thing. So I watch my own kid kind of grow up, and he seems to like us and want to hang around. And sometimes I'm like, well, we should be meaner to him. Like, he needs to get out of the house and go get in crazy adventures. And I think about the adventures I got into when I was a kid, and I was like, we did some real Stand By Me shit. I was like, well, there's the train tracks. Let's just ride down them for 2 hours and see what we find. We would find developments, like people building houses, and we would wander into them and be like, well, no one's here. Look at all these pipes. Let's make a potato gun. And we would just gather other people's crap, steal it, essentially, and make things, and make swords and stuff. And it was just a stupid thing to do. But it was awesome. And I don't want my son doing that. So he likes us and he hangs around the house. So the kids on bike genre, I just feel is important to note that they wanted to get away from home for a very, very specific reason. And that's what these kids are like. They don't want to be at home anymore.
Yeah,
so I go to the woods.
I'm 44. So, I mean, we were playing out all the time, all the day. We were out in the blizzards. I grew up in Colorado. We had a pyromaniac phase, I think, and melted a lot of action figures. And yes,
Ooh, yeah.
But
we would take the point of a compass, the sharp point where you would spin the compass, not this compass, but the draw circle compass, and stab it into the GI Joes and paint like red drooling out of the holes and be like, it's like battle damage. It's like not just like the pew pew, but like they've been shot, and it was like probably traumatic. Not a good thing to do. That's like messed up serial killer stuff, but we were all doing it. So
I mean, but you capture the 90s beautifully in The Staircase in the Woods. And
thank
that was part of, I think, one of the things that I really enjoyed was just going back to that time period. You were probably graduated 93, 94, probably?
94, yeah.
94. And I was 5 years later, 90, 99. So
you're closer to their age in the book, I think.
Closer to their age in the book. But you captured it, I mean, amazingly well. And there are things that I really miss about the 90s that we don't necessarily see today.
Well, what do you miss?
You know,
I mean, I do too, but I'm curious what you know.
You know, I think the fact that we were just getting onto the computers, so we had a little bit of that knowledge, but we weren't on it all the time. We weren't on devices all the time.
Yeah, I don't know, does anyone here know what a bulletin board system is? Right. So, bulletin board system is like proto-internet. You would run it off your computer and hook a phone line up to it, and people could call in with their computer to your computer. So I was like 15, and I had a phone line, and I was like, my parents don't pay enough attention to me, so I'm going to set up a bulletin board system. So I did. I hooked it up to my computer and set up a bulletin board system, and then I ran a bulletin board system out of my house for like years. At one point, I had like a really high phone bill. My dad was like, "What is this?" I mean, he was really pissed, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know. It's weird. Don't worry about it." It's probably a mistake. We should call the phone company. One of the weirder things that did happen to me, so I was probably more online even then than I should have been because I created my own tiny internet. But I had Bruce Campbell call in to promote Army of Darkness to my bulletin board system.
Oh, that is
at like
so cool.
2:00 in the morning. It was crazy. He was on Prodigy doing a promotion there, like a real promotion, and someone was like, I heard you do bulletin board systems. And so they gave him my phone number because that's what they had to do. You had to give out just your home phone number. And then he called it and dialed in and left a message for people.
That's amazing.
He called people screwheads. It was great. It was really
cool.
Oh,
my gosh. Yeah. You know, Army of Darkness was probably my first horror movie.
Oh, was it really?
That was really, the first one. And then Aliens.
Yeah.
And Alien. And then moving on. I also miss the fact that the movies that we watched were all done with practical effects.
Yeah, I don't mind CGI in the broader sense when it's used well. Like I just saw Sinners, and that's like one where like I feel like whatever CGI is in that, because it's surely in there, I feel like you can't see it, and there's a lot of practical effects to make it work and make it sing. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I get it.
So when you write horror, I'm thinking of like The Wanderers. I'm thinking Staircase in the Woods. You're more of a literary horror guy.
Oh no, am I?
I think so. I think you're along the lines of
people who write
like,
literary would be like.
Well, I think like The Wanderers is your version of The Stand.
I mean,
about
it definitely is, but I mean, I didn't. For lack of a better term, I didn't write it to be literary horror. I don't. In fact, I very much wrote it to be horror. It's also like a science fiction version of The Stand rather than anything supernatural. I didn't aim for a literary voice in it. I know sometimes I maybe do it with like a book like this or maybe like the Mirror and Black books, but it's not necessarily. I'm not reaching for literary per se. Not that I have any problems with literary. I just don't think I'm. I don't think I'm good enough to be considered literary. I'm just trying to write cool books that people like to read.
Horror, I'm thinking like Stephen Graham Jones.
Yeah, definitely.
And, these...
Paul Tremblay, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It fits in there, and I think that horror has sort of grown up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Horror is... I don't think it's just that it grew up. I think that it spread out. I think you have so many more voices now across the spectrum of experience that it's such a diverse, diffuse genre that is really interesting what's being done there. So I'm pretty excited just to see where it keeps going because people are reading it, which is great.
Exactly. And I think just reading it, you'll want more of it, and you continue on with it. I mean, Stephen Graham Jones is The Only Good Indians. You'll never look at deer the same way again.
No, I love that book because you're like, one of the things he does in that is I think one of the great tricks a writer, when they can pull it off well, and I'm not going to give anything away for those who haven't read it, the thing in your mind as you start it, you kind of imagine where it could go, and then it gets there like halfway through, and you're like, wait, but it should be over, and there's half a book left. And then it keeps, and you're like, what the fuck is happening now? And that's my favorite thing, because then you're just, like Fever House, Keith Ross, another book that you're like, it just kind of keeps pressing its advantage in going, like, you're like, but it should stop now. And it's not stopping. So where does it go when it should have stopped? And that's where it gets really interesting. That's where it goes into some space that, to me, gets really brave and weird and just fascinating.
Speaking of fucked up scenes, in The Staircase in the Woods, you do get a little violent here and there, but you never, and you really play with our minds.
Yeah.
What is it, and how do you do it? I mean, I need to know, because I mean, it's amazing what you do and how you play with our emotions in this book.
I have no idea how I do it. I like to think, like, how would I get tweaked by something? Because if something's going to bother me, and I feel like I have a high threshold for stuff that would bother people. So if I write something and I'm like, ooh, like that's no, I shouldn't, and then that's like, yeah, I probably should do that. But just in a sort of a general sense, so here's the thing, like when I sit down with certain authors to do author conversations, like when I sat down with Clay McLeod Chapman, like one of the questions is like, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing to us? Why are you like this? And it's an honorable question, because I love when I get that question in email. So I inevitably try to occasionally write scenes in books that I know I'm going to get emails about. Not like upset emails in a sort of a sociological sense. I just mean like, dude, what? Why? Why is this like this? Like, there's scenes in Swan Song that still live in my mind that are just tweaky. They just kind of like, oh no, the straitjacket game and cockroaches, and you're just like, there are things I remember in there, like the visceral sensations of like when Swan is removing the Job's mask, this thing that's on her face, live with me. And so I aim to be good enough and interesting enough to upset people enough that they email me.
So what sort of research do you do when you get ready for something like this?
I am a spectacularly lazy writer, which is to say I tend to write books and things that I have already researched just because I'm interested in them. I'm not researching for a book. It's that I'm researching because I am interested in something or obsessed by something or driven mad and apples by something. I go down a rabbit hole because I'm fascinated by it, and then eventually like a book emerges. Like the apples thing is a good example. Like I did not go into apples thinking this is why I'm reading these or looking up apples because I want to write horror about them. I was just like, what are these apples? And then I just kept learning more and more about it, becoming more and more fascinated by not just apples in general, but agricultural production and how certain things get to stay and certain things have to go, and what in terms of our grocery chain, what sort of like the Red Delicious apple, the history of that, or the history of cider production in America, or the history of the FBI and Prohibition and what they went and cut down, Chapman's orchards, and you're just like, wow, that's such a weird history. And then you look mythologically, the Eris in the apple, or the apple in the Garden of Eden, and it just becomes fascinating to me. And so then a book happens. Like it's not, I don't go into it thinking a book will emerge from that. It's just over time, it's like you set the pot to boil, and when it boils, it's time to write.
And then it just comes. Does it just come to you?
Sometimes, yeah. Like that's usually what it takes. Like Wanderers, for years, I had the image of the sleepwalkers in my head. Just like I had the staircase and the idea of people going up and disappearing. Just like I know this is a thing, but I don't know what it means. That's not a story. It's just a hook, a mechanism. I needed a story, and Wanderers particularly, like I call that like my anxiety Voltron book. I'm like I could have farmed it for years with like one anxiety per book, but I was like, what if I just take all the anxieties and I put them in one book. I'm like, we're going climate change, and artificial intelligence, and political instability, and theocracy, and obviously pandemic.
And yeah, it was a weird year for that book to come out. I do have to say.
2019, yeah, just
before, and it's so funny because authors, because we do get a lot of political thriller authors through the door here, and I just find in general y'all have your finger on the pulse a little bit closer than the rest of us.
I didn't mean to. It was an accident. Yeah.
It's strange though when there's like some political coup in Ukraine and Jack Carr wrote it 2 years before.
Right.
I mean, it's just it's strange when fiction becomes reality.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just a case of like that level of research, like the pandemic here happened, and people are like, oh my God, you predict there's like a bat-based pandemic in your book. I'm like, yeah, but that's like a thing. I didn't make that up. Mm-hmm. That's like that's how pandemics will occur. We just tend to stop them faster. This one just kind of got out of containment, and like I didn't make that up. I think the only thing with Wanderers, the one thing that freaked me out was like in that book, the artificial intelligence Black Swan identifies the pandemic before it happens, and in reality, there was an algorithm called Blue Dot that pegged it before it happened, and I was like, oh, that's too close. Black Swan, Blue Dot. They're both colors. They're both BL fronted colors. 2 words. Like, oh no. So that I felt like I bled something into reality. So it might be my fault. All of it. Sorry.
Thanks a lot, Chuck.
I
appreciate it.
I know. We got to spend time at home. Wasn't that nice?
Exactly. It was. It was
sourdough.
Absolutely.
That was me.
Sourdough and way too many video games.
Way too many video games. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Speaking of which, you bring up some of the classic video games, Pokemon, etc. in Staircase to the Woods.
Yeah, there's a game component to
a little bit of a gaming component. Are you a gamer yourself?
Oh yeah. I've been for a very long time, and my son is. So it's like
I just got brave enough to play horror video games this year, and so I was playing. I've been working as I was reading this. I was also playing. Silent Hill 2 remake.
Oh, that's
and
I haven't played the remake, but I played the original.
I mean, just talk about psychological creepy. I mean, getting it on both fronts.
Yeah, those will mess you up.
It really is. But
because they're experiential, that's the great thing about them.
Exactly.
You don't have to create deep character. I mean, it's good when they do. Like Alan Wake 2 does a really good job of creating that and Control and some other games like Remedy does. But you don't need it. Like if you're just now the person playing is seeing creepy stuff on screen, that can be enough.
Exactly.
Not enough in a book, but it's enough in a video game.
But I think, it's hard to get as deep with something like that, like a movie or a television show, as you can with a book. And this book, I mean, it's really eye-opening in terms of getting deep into friendships and understanding what kind of that dynamic associated with it. And then the horror that you get into it is really pretty scary. But at the same time, I do find that with a book, I can sit through and read a horror book and get through it and just kind of relax a little bit when I'm done.
Sure.
Whereas when I'm doing something like that, that's, where you're kind of maybe controlling the character, you have a harder time disassociating yourself. And I think that that's one of the nice things about reading horror is the fact that, you can, I don't find myself getting as, I become more energized rather than fatigued.
Yeah, I think because you set the pace and you set the experience a little more. Like you kind of hunker down on the prose as much as you want or kind of skim past as much as you want. There's ways to control how you deal with it. I mean, it's a little different with something like audio, but even there, how you turn it on, turn it off, the speed can change. Yeah,
So you've written a lot of different types of books. You've just came out this year with a middle grade.
2 middle grades now. Yeah,
monster movie that we had on
Dustin Grimm was the first one. Yeah,
Dustin Grimm. Yeah, and you've written young adult. Atlanta Burns is sort of young adult, but I really classify that more as noir mystery.
Sure.
You've written a lot of horror. You've done urban fantasy. I mean, you've written all over the board is there a particular genre that you particularly like to read or to
it's
write?
all horror. It's all horror. Everything I do
Yeah.
is horror. Like my first novel, Blackbirds, came out, and the publisher for it was like, I wrote a horror crime novel and series.
Yeah.
And so the publisher was like, we're calling it urban fantasy. I'm like, there's no urban or fantasy. So people who read urban fantasy want a certain thing. And I'm like, that's probably not good because they're going to go into this experience. Like genre, as much as it's a thing we just made up and it shouldn't be canonical in any way, people are going to go to that and be like, I want a certain kind of experience with urban fantasy, and they're not going to get it from that book. So I was like, okay. But they called it that, and it was fine, except for the many emails and Goodreads reviews that I got. And then because it had a female-fronted protagonist, so people were like, this is too rough for YA. I'm like, it's not YA. Please stop yelling at me. Then another publisher picked it up, and I was like, hey, so the first publisher called it urban fantasy, so I don't want to call it that. And they're like, don't worry about it. We're going to call it the same genre that they call Joe Hill books. I'm like, finally, horror. And they're like, supernatural suspense. I was like, do you know who Joe Hill is? Because I think that's horror. But they didn't want to call it horror then either. So I was always writing horror. I mean, Zero is an invasive or science fiction novels, but they're horror. Invasive, has ants eating skin off people. Zeros is about horrible body horror meat computer people. I was always trying, even in Star Wars, I'm like, well, spiders are going to jump out of this ship. And that's just one scene they open it when spiders jump out. And I'm like, fuck it.
Well, yeah, you got to
all of this.
Exactly. Although you're not allowed to use that in Disney books, I'm sure.
What the fuck it or
fuck it? Yeah.
No. You could probably say some
fraggot.
Yeah.
Fraggot. Yeah. So what was it like writing in another person's universe?
By which I assume you mean Star Wars.
Correct.
Cool. I mean, cool until it's not. I enjoyed writing the novels a lot. Part of the reason it was so fun was because they didn't know what they wanted. I tweeted about wanting to write Star Wars, and which is not how you should get a job, especially now that Twitter is. But it worked. The September 4th, I tweeted about wanting to write Star Wars, and then I met the editor for Del Rey Star Wars at New York Comic Con that year, and they were like, so we read your books, and I was like, well, then I guess it's been good talking to you. I'm sorry I didn't get the job. And they're like, no, we read the young adult. They read my young adult books, the Empyrean Sky, and they're like, we feel like you'd be a good fit. So there's movies coming out next year, and we need a book pretty fast. I was like, okay, how fast? And they're like, 3 months. And I was like, oh, that's fast. So okay, so I put together an outline. They approved it, and then they were like, so the book was originally going to come out in December alongside the film, The Force Awakens. They're like, so the cool news is now we're going to release it in September instead. I'm like, oh, that is cool. And they're like, so that's a few months forward. So we're going to have to shave off 2 months off your deadline. So now you have a month to write the book. So I had 1 month to write that first book. And then ironically, the book came out year to the day, September 4th, 1 full year after I tweeted about wanting to write it. That's how fast that process happened. Usually when you write a book, it takes a couple years for it to sort of go through its entire paces. So this did not go through that. So it was weird, but because they didn't know anything about what they wanted, they were like, just write a book. I'm like, cool. I'm going to do it. I had a few parameters I had to stick to and a fence I had to sort of remain inside. And some things I couldn't do. I couldn't use the main characters, the standard, core trilogy of characters. And then it was off to the races because they needed a book.
It's incredibly fast. I was talking with Yvonne Navarro, and she'd written some stuff for Buffy, and Weston Oaks wrote one for right before Alien Isolation. The game came out.
Yep.
And I mean, they've all said that they have to write a book in a month and a half, and that's all and 300 pages. How do you do it? How do you get through something like that? Is it just sitting and typing 8 hours a day?
It's cocaine.
Yeah.
No, I at that time my son was 4, and I had an office in the house, but I was having a shed built in my yard where I could go write, and that shed saved that book's life because my kid was 4 at that point, and you can't stop a 4-year-old from wanting to play with you. He was at home. And he was relentless. Like he'd be like, he's like, "Do you want to play?" And of course, I'm not gonna be like, "No, Daddy's got to write Star Wars. It's serious business." Like he wants to play Star Wars, and I'm thinking about Star Wars. Of course, I'm gonna do that. My wife was always like, "Well, you have a door, you just close it." And I'm like, "That doesn't work. Have you met the child? Like he's like a zombie. You'll see like fingers under the door. Like he'll John McClane his way in through the vents. You cannot stop the kid." So, but weirdly, like having that just a little bit of distance, being in the yard like a weirdo in a shed writing, was all it took. He was like, "I don't go out there for that," and he just never does. He sees no. It's like it's 100 feet from the house, and he doesn't bother me. Nobody bothers me out there. They're just like, "I don't know what's going on in that room.
Exactly.
Don't go in there."
Exactly. Next thing you know, there's body parts, things
Yeah.
like that. Maybe a little cauldron.
There's just a red tarp. Don't look at it.
A little. We're going a little bit into the Jeff Lindsay territory right
Oh
there.
yeah.
Definitely.
Murder shed time.
So, do we have any questions from the audience? Open it up for you guys, because I'm sure you guys have some stuff. All right, let me go ahead.
I'm curious. Hey, Chuck. I'm curious what your process is once this idea won in the Thunderdome,
Right.
and it sounds like you said, you kind of have already pre-researched these stories. So what is the next step? Are you outlining? Are you looking at characters? Are you just starting a draft? Or
So usually I used to be a really big outliner. When I first started trying to write, I mean, I had written like 5 very serious trunk novels, like trunk novels that need to be in a trunk under the earth somewhere. I was trying to write Blackbirds, my first published novel at that time, and it took me like 5 years. And I would get about 75% of the way through this book, and then it would just sort of unspool. I always say it's like when you go into a room and you don't know why you went into that room. That was me with this book. I would be like, I don't know what happens now, and I'm lost in the woods. So I did what anyone would do at that point, which was I tried to win a screenwriting competition to become a screenwriter, I guess. And I did win it. And the prize was a mentorship with a guy named Steven Susko, who is a screenwriter. He wrote the Grudge films, and he does a ton of different adaptations, Jack Ketchum adaptation. So his whole thing was adapting pre-existing material from the page to the screen. So I was like, well, what if we take my piece of crap unfinished novel and we make that into a screenplay, and then maybe I'll use that to rewrite it into a novel. And he's like, it's your dime. I don't care. That's great. So he's like, well, he's like, first step is outline. And I was like, no. I'm like, I don't think you understand how this works, Hollywood man. You outline. Your corporate masters have to have an outline, but like I talk to the clouds. Like I consult with horses. Like, what do you have to say, horse? And that's where I get a novel. And he's like, how's that going for you? I was like, yeah, not well. Okay, I see what you said there. So he like, it was like, Rocky montage of like running up snowy hills and punching frozen beef. Like I outlined a book over the course of like 2 days, and I hated every minute of it. But at the end of it, I had like a beginning and middle and a thing I never had before, which was an ending. And suddenly I was like, oh, there's a story here. Like, even though it's not complete, like I haven't done the writing part of it, I have lensed it. I figured it out. And so from that point, like outlining became a big part of my process until Wanderers hit. And Wanderers, despite being my like plottiest, biggest, sort of most mechanical book, I had pitched it on having written, I think, like 4 or 5 tentpole chapters. I never outlined anything. And I was like, I think these chapters have given me enough sense of what I want to do with it. And then I just started to write a story from there. And then the story didn't change much from the original draft from what Wanderers was. Other books definitely have. The second book, Book of Accidents, again, I have not outlined since that. So, but like Book of Accidents, I not like rewrote snout to tail, but it went through 3 or 4 like really serious sort of revisions of just like rethinking the book and just like moving stuff around and moving it back. And it was like a way more sort of like hands-on, tear apart kind of a thing. So I don't outline anymore, but I just start to kind of go usually with it. Usually once I have figured out who the characters are, because for me, again, that's the only thing that really matters for me is who they are. Once I know who they are, and I try to imagine, like with Wanderers and even this book, like having a character who was a game designer was interesting to me, not only because like I can bring a little bit of that to the table because I've done a little bit of it, but it also allowed me to sort of like, well, here's that character's perspective on everything that's going on in this book. And so that opens up for me that avenue into the narrative. Wanderers is all about trying to find the small stories of these characters, but each small story is like a doorway or a portal into how they perceive the apocalypse happening, a pandemic unfolding. Like, I don't want it to be like this top-down 30,000-foot view of like, now I'm, the History Channel, narrating a documentary. Like, I want it to be boots on the ground. These are these characters, but they all have different ways in. One's a CDC person, but one's like a farm girl from Pennsylvania. So you get ideally a different sort of prismatic effect on what that narrative means to them and to the reader in terms of the experience. That was a very long answer to a simple question. I'm sorry, but yes.
All right, some other questions. Patrick, any online?
Patrick's gone.
He's
The
left
internet
the
has
building.
eaten him.
Hey, Chuck.
Hey.
Welcome back to Arizona. It's
Thanks.
always a
Good
pleasure.
to see you again.
So you write in so many different genres. I always think it's interesting that you are very, it seems very passionate about kind of giving back to other authors. Like, you've written all your writing advice books, even though you're very upfront about saying all writing advice is bullshit, but here's mine. And then your blog, and back in the day when Twitter was good, you and Scalzi and Delilah Dawson were always really amazing about giving advice and talking about the way you write and your suggestions. I don't want your more advice because I have those books. What about that? In a nice way, why do you do that? Why do you think that's important to you to really continually? Because the gentle writing advice just came out a couple years ago. That's something you've consistently done. Why is that something that you feel like you're really passionate about doing?
Oh, it helped me. Like, when I was trying to figure out how to do this thing, I would read as much as I could. Lawrence Block's writing books, Stephen King. Talking about Yvonne Navarro was a great example of, while there's no writing book available from Yvonne, I wrote Yvonne a letter after having read, what was her Meteor book? It's like a deep impact book. What is it called? Does anyone have the... Fine.
I don't.
Regardless,
Yeah.
I love the book, and it was like the same time I was reading sort of a lot more McCammon and stuff, and I wrote her a letter just to talk about how much I really loved it, and she wrote back and was very kind about sort of offering thoughts on writing and stuff, and so just having, both on the sort of technical level, people who write writing books and writing advice, even though writing advice is bullshit, but writing bullshit fertilizes. That's the whole thing. Like, it's as long as you view writing advice as being agnostic and imperfect, something that maybe you use that someone else will not. I think that as long as you don't take everything as gospel, you're good. But then also on the personal level of sort of like having authors who have helped me out over the years, who that whole like ladder out and a light on. Not everybody needs to be doing everybody like infinite favors, but like a good word here and there. Just when you ask for something, to try to be there to help. Blurbing, I know blurbing is a sort of a fraught idea for some people, and I know some Simon & Schuster, I think the president has now said they're going to start to pull away from that. But I take those seriously. Like, I can't always do it, but I try very hard to, and I think it's an honor to be asked to be able to say something nice about someone's book. And I know it's in a sort of a marketing capacity, but like I that means something to me. And it certainly means something when people have done it for me, when they've taken the time to have read a thing and be like, I'm going to say something nice and, put my name on it and endorse it, essentially, is a huge, huge thing. And that can actually open doors for authors when you have like a big author who does that. So just sort of on both of those levels, that's where it was important to me coming up. And so I feel like maybe it's still important.
Me? Okay, yeah. Excuse me. I do have some questions from our online
All right.
audience. Actually, here's a good one. Somebody's asking, what scares you the most?
Wow. Like, the real answer is like just the news, just anything on the news right now. Any of it, all the news. And some of this goes into Wanders, but things like the post-antibiotic age was pretty freaky. Like, we found another new antibiotic recently, so that's feeling good. But like, that was always a scary one. Like, I have friends who work in epidemiology and or journalists who write about that stuff, and they're always like, yeah, that stuff's pretty freaky. And like, that's why I made Wanderers a fungal thing too, because I was like, they do a bit in The Last of Us, at least the TV show. I don't know that they do it in the game, where they have like it opens on like a TV show from the 60s where they're like, what scares you? And someone's like, well, a fungal disease, because we don't really know how to protect against it. Wanderers goes into that sort of in a big way as to why we can't and what happens. That freaked me out. Medical stuff is definitely like a freaky deaky kind of thing. So COVID was certainly a good time. Actually, I will tell you the weird thing for me about COVID was I expected to be freaked out when it happened. But I think my anxiety took like a fucking victory lap, because it was like, we did it. Like the thing we've been worrying about all this time, it happened. Sit down, like just relax. It's here now. Like you could stop worrying about it because it occurred. And I felt like, I'm just gonna sit here now and just stare at the world.
Well, Tammy, you must have a question related to the medical field. I mean, you work in that environment, and it's probably a perfect place for a horror novel, right? Any questions come to mind?
Not that I have, no. Sorry.
That's all right.
Um,
Apparently you have a question now,
Apparently I do.
whether you want to or not.
I often ask writers what genre they read. What are you tapping when you go home at night and hit your nightstand? Assuming you have one.
Oh, like what books are
Yeah,
there?
what are you reading?
I mean, like in terms of what I brought with me was, and he's here in a few nights, Nat Cassidy's When the Wolf, what was it called? When the Wolf Comes Home. And it is like balls to the wall. Like the first 30 pages are like, there's a lot of bad shit already happening. He calls out Kuntz, and it vibes a little bit like that. I mean, like more rough and rippier than his books were. But man, it's like the death and then torn in half and death, and you're like, oh man, he is not fucking around. So like horror definitely is the stuff that I read there. I just got Omakatsu's Fiend, so I'm very excited about that. But I also am researching demons right now, so I have a lot of demon books I'm reading.
So you're not afraid to read the genre that you write in. There are
No.
some authors who you're talking to them, they're action writers, and they're like, yeah, I just finished a 18th century novel about tribes in Africa. Don Winslow.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I just, have you read Frontiers?
Yeah.
It's like 1,000-page tome on tribal Africa.
Yeah. No, I definitely read horror. Like I try to read outside of the genre I write, but I mean, I think it also helps. First of all, just because I grew up on horror and I like horror, but also helps to sort of know what's kind of going on. My next book is called The Calamities, but its original name was The Fiends, and then like Omakatsu was like has this book coming out called The Fiend, and I'm like, no, and then it's like demons, and I'm like, no. So like I emailed her to be like, hey, just to let you know, I'm not doing anything. She's like, can I send you a copy? She's like, let's talk. I mean, it was like nothing. They're nothing alike. But I was like, I gotta see it. I gotta read it. But that was like one of those things where it's good to be sort of tapped into what's actually happening, so you're not accidentally trying to. Because I think it's you find that sometimes there will be cohorts of books that come out that are covering similar things because we're all kind of vibing in a certain way. And so when that happens, I think it's important to sort of just know what's going on in your genre.
Does the Satanic Panic have its charms? I mean, that was my era, kind of the 80s.
Like the charm, as in good charms, or
Good, yeah. I mean, a good subject to.
it's a great subject, but how messed up was that? Because like there are people who went to jail for stuff that never happened.
Yeah.
Like weird memory regressions. Like they kidnapped me and did satanic rituals on me. Like never happened, but people are in jail for it. Like really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
We got like that was like the moral panic of moral panics.
Totally.
It took over and people bought it, and then we were like, let's just not look at this ever again. And
It's all that heavy
casually-
metal music.
yeah, all the backmasking.
I have a fun comment. Someone says horror videos sound extremely scary to me. They actually sound scary to me too.
Horror videos.
Horror videos. Is
What
there
does that
such a
mean?
thing? I don't know. Were you
Like I think they mean snuff films.
Well, that would be.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they have horror video games?
Oh, horror video games.
horror video
I thought
games,
you just
yeah.
said horror videos. I was like,
Oh,
this
yeah.
Video nasties.
guy
No.
with a camcorder being weird. I don't know.
A question about your dreams. Now we're getting deep here.
Oh, okay.
Do you have colorful dreams that influence your writing at all?
No, not really. My dreams are weird. Like I travel in them all the time. I'm always just somewhere else. I'm constantly moving in places. Like it's this weird sense of transit and movement. I don't know why.
Sorry,
That's-
Renee,
yeah.
you're striking out here. I think you're going to strike out with this one too. Do you believe in ghosts?
Oh no, we're not going to strike out there. That's a topic. I don't know. I grew up. So when I say I don't know, I'm also going to say that I grew up in a haunted house, and that I know it was like I have evidence in my mind that it was real, and that it was a dead person. So this is a long story. So it's part of what goes into like Book of Accents. But so I had a Ouija board, which you shouldn't use. I went upstairs with my cousin Julie, friend of mine. We would sometimes stay at each other's houses over the summers, and we used the Ouija board, and we got a name, Michael Thomas, on the board, and we were talking with something. And number one, after we did that, that's when like things happening at my house that were like haunt related, like ratcheted up by like 100%. And what made me feel good about it was I was almost never alone when they were happening. I would have friends over and stuff would happen, family over, things would happen, and I was like, so I was not just like, guys, something weird happened. Like they were like, dude, something weird is happening in your house. I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm here, and I'm glad we're together. But so it was like a couple years later, stuff had been happening a lot, and a lot of electronic things and weird movements and stuff in the house. We had this little bookshelf. For whatever reason, we had in my family's farmhouse an antechamber to a bathroom. Like there was a bathroom upstairs and then a room before it. And the room was functionless. To this day, I still don't know why we really had that room, but it had a bookshelf in it. And on this bookshelf was a family genealogical journey. Like one of those things, it's an empty book that you're supposed to fill out your family tree, about your property, about your parents and their grandparents. No one had filled shit out in this book. It was like someone had printed our name on it, like it said us, but no one had ever taken time to ever do anything with it. So I thought I would ask my parents, and I kind of just thought that the property that we had was owned by my family for a long time. I knew we were in the area for a long time, so I just assumed we owned it. So I asked my dad about it, and he's like, no, like my father, my grandfather, his father, bought it from this family. I was like, oh, okay. And it was the Thomas family, and their son Michael wandered out into the woods, the same woods that I would get lost in, and fucking died. And I was like, ah. So I would ask my dad, like, later on, be like, do you, like, see shit in this house? Like, is anything weird happening? He'd be like, no. And he would get pissed at me, like, act like I was, like, a pussy or whatever. Like, no, there's no ghosts in here. Ugh. Like, okay, Jesus. Years later, after he died, by the way, my mom was like, oh, he saw things all the time in the house. He just didn't want to admit it. And then he had this whole thing with when his dad died, he and his mom experienced the sound of mirrors and windows breaking in the one room of the house at 3 a.m. every night for like weeks. He and my grandmother experienced this together. And I was like, man, why didn't we could have connected on this thing. And you were like, no, shut up, go to bed. There's no ghosts. And then he's like hiding under the blankets. Like, God damn it. Damn it, Dad. But also, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what that is. So, like, as much as I believe in ghosts and I believe something was there and that was, I don't have, like, evidence in the sense that, like, I can hand it to you and say this is real. So, again, long answer. But we tapped some oil on that one. Any questions in the room?
All right.
Piggyback off of an earlier question, you said there were 4 or 5 tent pole scenes that you had in mind for Wanderers when you kicked it off.
Yep.
What were they? What did that look like?
Oh, one of them was the introduction. There were introductory scenes. So it was Pete's introduction. It was like Shayna's introduction. Benji's. Maybe it was Benji's first encounter with Black Swan, actually, when he goes into the CDC to experience the room, the sort of the black room that it lives in. And I forget what the other ones were, but it was character introductions. Marcy was in there, like, although she doesn't appear until later in the book, although that took me a little while to figure out. It was like stuff that, like, so like one of the things that I will do sometimes when I'm trying to figure out a story is I will do what I call like a character test drive, is I will write characters with no expectation that what I'm writing will be in a draft. I just want to know who they are, and I want to put them through their paces a little bit and see what happens. And that's sort of how those started, was like I just wanted to know who these people were. I kind of had them in my mind as to what who they were and what they served in the story, but like were they the right people for it? I wasn't sure. So I wrote those, and I'm like, oh, I really like these characters for what I want to do, and I actually liked the scenes that I had written with them. So they more or less stayed, and I sort of finessed those to make them what I wanted to be before Wanderer sort of became the thing that it became.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you.
I'm actually a bookseller at a different bookstore in the state, so I was really fortunate. I got to read Staircase in the
yay.
Woods in like November, and it's amazing.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you like haunted houses got brought up, because without like spoiling anything, haunted houses are like a big thing once again.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you have any favorite haunted house media, movies, anything like that.
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, Shirley Jackson is such a classic. But I also like the Flanagan adaptation there of actually Flanagan in general is. Boy, can we just shout out Dr. Sleep? The film, specifically the film. Like, how did that dude make a movie that somehow serves as the sequel to both the book and the film, and like make Stephen King be like, maybe the film wasn't bad? And I'm like, are you an angel, Mike Flanagan? Yeah. What's the one on Netflix? Is it called His House? Or no, about the immigrant experience sort of one. His House. That's adjacent to that sort of space. Yeah. Hopefully that gets you there.
I gotta say, Matheson's Hell House.
Oh, Matheson's Hell House is a classic. What's the Straub one? Shadowland. Isn't that's a haunted house, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, also good. Yeah.
All right, so I think we're getting to that point where these chairs are incredibly uncomfortable to sit in. Yeah. We've got a giveaway book tonight, Chuck. Can you give us a number between 1 and 22?
Just give it to you? Just tell it to you?
Just whatever number you want.
22.
All right, who has number 22? One of you has 22 in your ticket. Check your book. You get a free book.
It's
Can't
me,
win.
I won.
You
No.
can't win if you don't play. All right. Woohoo. All right. So you're going to get, it's been on the New York Times list, Heat of the Everflame, the advanced reading copy. We'll go ahead and give that to you at the event. For those of you who are sitting in these chairs tonight, first of all, online audience, thank you very much. What we're going to go ahead and have you guys do is pick up your chairs, put them just to the side, the right side, because if you put it to the left side, chairs go all wonky and they fall on you and they kill your ankles. And then everybody get in line based off of your number. Let's give Chuck a round of applause.
Thank you for coming
so
out.
much.
Thank you, guys.
Are you comfortable being up here signing? Is this most comfortable?
Can I stand?
Yeah, absolutely.
I sat in a car for 6 hours. I'm ready.
Oh, God, yeah. Do you need, like,